Hey, Stefan's here. Cool. That's two of us. We can have a good discussion now, mate. Should we talk about? Probably shouldn't talk about the thing that we just discovered, the slot thing. Maybe we shouldn't. We'll see. We'll see when we get to it. I just went to post this video to Mastodon and Blue Sky and all the other places you're going to post it now. I saw a link pop up here. A story from Ars Technica. Under new law, cops bust famous cartoonist for AI generated child sex abuse images. Now, I'm kind of interested in this because of that Moi AI data breach that happened, was that September, October? It was the day, that day that I was seeing the FBI in San Francisco. And I open up this breach and it's like AI generated girlfriend service. And the person that sent it to me is like, it's full of CSAM. It's like, what? Like it's AI prompts. And then you read the AI prompts and it's like, yeah, actually there is a lot of that. So anyway, that brought about a lot of discussion around, now this is discussion from randos on the internet. Okay, a lot of them on Twitter, a lot of them operating under pseudo-anonymous accounts. A lot of discussion about that AI generated content and does it actually constitute CSAM because there has not been any abuse of a child. And like part of me is just like, how are you even having this discussion? Like, when is it ever okay to sit there and go, well, the computer generated it, so that's okay? Like, it's ridiculous. But of course, a lot of it comes back down to what is the law. And there was law passing, which has since passed. If I just read the first para of this, late last year, California passed a law against the possession and distribution of child sex abuse material that has been generated by AI. The law went into effect on January 1, and Sacramento police announced today that they have already arrested their first suspect, a 49-year-old Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist. So, yeah. Anyway, the new law declares that AI-generated CSAM is harmful even without an actual victim. In part, says the law, that is because all kinds of CSAM can be used to groom children into thinking sexual activity with adults is normal. But the law singles out AI-generated CSAM for special criticism due to the way that generative AI systems work. And then it goes on to explain, well, it gets trained on something, which is the real stuff. Anyway, I think that's really good news. Like, locking people up for generating this content is good stuff. Like, there's really no sympathy there, is there, for anyone in that space? Now, I do wonder of the law enforcement agencies that in some cases actually reached out and said, could we please have the Moi AI data? And I got to be honest, like I don't think I've done that with any other breach unless it's like well and truly into that illegal space and I go to a law enforcement agency and go, I think you should see this. But in this case, I was like, yes, I think it would be good for you to have that. And maybe knock on some doors. Actually, there's some interesting nuances there. So there are many discussions with many agencies around the world, and without naming which ones for which, part of the problem with a law enforcement agency taking data such as that Moi AI data is you've obviously got a lot of people in there that will be perfectly innocent. They're just generating their AI girlfriends or whatever turns you on, mate. Maybe get a hobby. Anyway, maybe that is the hobby. But there are obviously people in there that are bad people. And my discussion with many of the agencies was around the fact that I'm sure there will be correlation between individuals that are subject to real life investigations for real life in-person crimes that will correlate with the data in there. I don't know how you use that legally and what happens in court, etc. Just think it's really interesting stuff. And I remember one agency in particular saying, we can't take this data because if we hold this data and in there are proper, genuine pedophiles doing real world harm to children and we don't do anything, that puts them in a really awkward situation legally. You know, what if the victims then have recourse against this particular agency because nothing was done? Which is a little bit of a shame because it's like, it always comes back to lawyers, doesn't it? Like, we could get sued because we took this data to try and catch pedos, but we didn't catch some of them. And anyhow, what a mess. What a mess. All right, Steeler Logs. Speaking of messes, and g'day everyone that's joined. Simon, James, Joe, the game is over. Philip, g'day. I think a lot of you are in the UK, aren't you? Or that part of the world. You should see how sunny it is here today. It's only 22 degrees, but I was getting too hot in the sun. So we're going to do this and go to the beach, I think, have a swim. I have been figuring out, Steph and I have been figuring out, Stephen's here, what to do with Steeler Log data. And in fact, when Steph and I saw each other in Oslo last month, we were sitting down there just talking about like what can we do with this data. And as a bit of a recap, Steeler Log data is data collected by malware, running on infected machines, capturing the website that someone goes to, and then the credentials that they enter. So let's say, how do you get malware? All right, well, it's some of the examples I've seen just from direct communication with people at previous Steeler Logs is obviously kids in the gaming space, and they're downloading cracks and cheats and things like that, and they're not all good. I mean, it's probably never a good idea in the first place, but some of them are infected as well. So they do that, or they're downloading pirated content that's an executable rather than just the .mpg or AVI, or I don't know what pirated content is, like whatever it is. And of course, it's something malicious and all the other ways. So people unknowingly infected by malware is capturing all this data, it's chucking into logs. And then there is an entire cottage industry around Steeler Logs where they are predominantly advertised through Telegram. They're available to purchase from Telegram. Many of the services there, or many of the channels even have things like subscriptions where you can go and pay a certain amount and then you get a certain amount back in your subscription or a certain number. I screen capped one that literally popped up whilst I was writing this blog post. This Telegram message popped up. It said, "Are you looking for quality logs? You need real-time logs, maximum 5 years, up to 5,000 logs per day in real time without delaying and clipping." So imagine malware-infected victims going about the web, doing their normal thing, and as that data is being captured, it's being fed down to people in real time because fresh is valuable. And see the attached video for how it works. I had someone comment, I think Stefan pointed this out, someone on Twitter saw this and was like, how do I see the video? It's a screen cap, mate. You can't see the video. It doesn't work. And I'm not going to point you to the channel. $300 buys a week, $1,000 buys a month. And then it's all repeated in Russian beneath that. So you get a bit of a sense of which corner of the world this might come from. And there's just ginormous volumes of these logs out there. Stephen says, did you ever manage to try the embedded play video? Just keep pressing play on the image and see what happens. So huge volumes of these out there. Now, incidentally, it is exactly 1 year today that I loaded this NAS API Steeler Log collection. Now, if I do a little search for that here, who am I? Troy Hunt, NAS API. And I remember exactly what it was because it was a year ago today because we got a lot of interest in this, and we were in Norway at the time because I looked at the tweet. I was like, why was it such a busy day last year? And I looked at the tweet and it was like at 12:05 a.m. Australia time. So, oh yeah, no. Inside the massive NAS.API credential stuffing list, this data was redistributed via a popular hacking forum. We've got 155 comments on this blog post. How much data was in there in total? I mean, it's going to be like, well, I could see that. Have I been pwned? NAS.API, who's been pwned? That was 70. Oh, it's funny how similar that is. So that is rounds to 71 million. The Steeler Logs I loaded this week round to 71 million. That's very coincidental. I just realized that. So anyway, you get these logs. Combinations, websites, email addresses, passwords. Every time I put these in a have I been pwned, such as with this NAS API thing, I get abused. I literally get abused. Now, if I read through some of the comments here, I'm sure some of them will be One of these comments is just a script tag with alert in it via discuss, as if that was actually going to do something. Someone here, why me? I mean, I have 2FA on most websites, but it's just annoying. Okay, right there. So 2FA will save you from this, obviously, to some extent. Anyway, people would get pissed every time. And the reason they get pissed is they say, you've told me I'm in Stealer Logs. You haven't told me anything else about it. What am I meant to do about it? Do I have malware? Do I not have malware? Yada, yada, yada. And the difficulty for us has been when we load a data breach, we'll look at the recent list. Let's say it was the MSI data breach yesterday. Oh, talk about that too. 249,990 email addresses in there. Now, everyone in there will be able to say, well, yes, I did actually make a warranty claim with MSI, and this is RMA data, which is now floating around the internet. I now know who to go and get pissed off at. I can go and get pissed off at MSI for losing my data, and let's talk about it now. And also not telling me. Now, I put a little bit of this out in a tweet thread, but because I do all the disclosure things, and because I couldn't find anything publicly about a disclosure from MSI about this leaked data, which incidentally, just to put this in context, included 250,000, around 250,000 email addresses, names, phone numbers, physical addresses, and warranty claims. And the warranty claim was effectively the product you're making the claim on. Now, when I struggled a little bit to get a reply, but did get a reply to the credit, I always ask, it's like, do you have the disclosure notice that you sent to people that I can then communicate back to my audience? Now, the response I got here from a lawyer there, who was very nice too. I want to put that out there. Not all lawyers are nice. Many of them start out nice and then aren't nice. This lady was nice, full stop. But anyway, here's the paragraph. She says, upon notice of this incident, I consulted with our US CCPA counsel who analysed our case and concluded the impacted RMA data would not trigger data breach notification obligations in California or any other US state. Our counsel concluded that the data impacted here did not trigger breach notification requirements under state laws. And there is no evidence the information was ever accessed. Under CCPA, personal information is defined as an individual's first name or first initial and last name in combination with any one or more of data elements, social security number, driver's license number, etc. While first name and last name are triggering data points, address, phone number, and email are not. Accordingly, the security incident we had did not trigger state data breach notification obligations. Now, I am not arguing with any of that, but it sucks. Now, the bit I'm not arguing about is the legal obligations for disclosure to individuals about data breaches have a very high burden of proof for when you actually need to do it. And it basically boils down to when there's a likelihood of causing serious harm or impact with rights and freedoms of individuals, which is the GDPR phrasing. And time again, people are stunned that they're in a data breach and they don't get told about it. And in this case, and again, this lawyer is right, that your name, your email address, your physical address, your phone number are not triggering points for needing to send notifications. Which I think my advice to organizations is you need to look at it through two lenses. There is your legal obligation. That is your bare minimum requirement. You have to do everything that's in there. There is then your social or moral obligation, and frankly, your responsibility for protecting the brand. Now, if you don't disclose when you lose all of that data purely on the basis of not having a legal obligation, you run the risk of having a lot of unhappy customers if they find out about it. And this was in the news. Well, it was on a YouTube channel, which is effectively, isn't that the news these days? And incidentally, the YouTube video that I embedded in the breach description was sent to me by the lawyer, which I found fascinating. It's a quarter of an hour. I watched the entire thing, and the YouTuber brutally throws MSI under the bus. but that is the link that they sent me in order to point to public So they actually made my job extraordinarily easy, because they're like, no, we didn't notify because we don't have to legally, and here's a full description of how bad the incident was. So kind of fascinating. But anyway, I digress. The whole point here was that in that case, people are in the MSI data breach. They know who to go and get upset with. The stealer logs, they don't know who to get upset with, so a bunch of people just get upset with me. It's not my fault. And I just get to the point with some of these previous stealer logs where I'd say, well, just unsubscribe. It's like you're using a free service to get a notification when your email address is in this breach, and then you're upset when you get the notification. Unsubscribe, and the problem goes away. But the problem doesn't go away because he's still in the stealer log. Now, occasionally we would take the passwords from these logs and we'd put them all in Pwn passwords. And then we'd say, okay, well, you can always go to Pwn passwords and check your password. We've got k-anonymity, so you can check a password without disclosing the password. So if it's not in there and you decide that it's not a risk, well, then you can keep it. But that wasn't really enough. So there was really only one bit missing from the entire picture in terms of everything that we have in stealer logs versus everything that we make available to people. And that one bit that was missing was the domains, I'll rephrase that, the URLs that your email address had appeared next to with credentials. Now, the URL is a little bit tricky insofar as the URL can have sensitive data in it. So you can have a whole bunch of information in there that we don't want to put in Have Been Pwned. Plus, you can end up with loads and loads of different URLs for the same service from the same person because there's a query string that's different or a path that's different. So we distilled it down to the domain, because at least the domain tells someone what is the service that they were using. So it means that if we can go through these stealer logs, extract the email addresses just like we always did, but also grab the domains that are against them, and then we can load that into Have Been Pwned, and then we can show that to people, that's a massive step forward, because for individuals, they can then go, oh yeah, like I do use Netflix and Spotify and all this sort of thing. If we can make it available to domain owners, which in most of our cases for domain searches is the organization that owns the domain, then they can look at it and go, well, hey, look at this. Like Joe was using xxx.com. Who knows what that is? And all these other things in there as well. You know, maybe they shouldn't be doing that on the corporate email address. So that's what we did. We've loaded all of these domains in. This is a massively, massively, massively non-trivial exercise. This is a massive order of magnitude harder than, say, the MSI data breach. And the simple reason is, for just about every data breach in Have Been Pwned, we have a little email extractor app. It's open source. It's all out there. You can see how it works. It effectively goes through and regexes out email addresses, and it does some checks such as, is the TLD valid? You know, is the domain and the alias properly constructed? Stefan, we need to make sure our logic is really solid on that, because we still have exceptions where we end up with like a hash or something in an alias, and then it's not the same at other parts of the app. So just mental note, got to make that consistent everywhere. Anywho, running a little application that usually takes a few minutes to run and sucks out millions of email addresses and then go, here you go, is different to the huge volumes of data you have for stealer logs, and then the fact that you've now got website, email address, and password. We can't just regex that out, because not only do we need to get the domains out, but we need to get the association of the domains to the email addresses. So I spent a lot of January mucking around trying to parse out all this data and make it usable. And that mucking around included things like, and initially looking at the logs and saying, well, most of them are just colon delimited domain, email address, passwords. So long as we have 2 columns in there, so we can do a split and have 3 parts, then we can take the first part, which is the domain and or the URL, and then we can extract the domain for that. And then we had all sorts of issues in terms of data integrity issues with that. Eventually, I end up just writing it in a .NET Console app where it's like, okay, go through and regex out, and this is the pattern we expect for this part and the pattern we expect for that part. A lot of mucking around. Eventually got, I think, what did I say in the blog post? Something like 220 million email address, password. No, we'll rephrase it. 220 million email address domain pairs. What is all the noise in this chat? Haxagarula. Please guide me what I should do. 16-year-old teen. On train hacking. Yeah, this is probably not the place for that. Please guide me. Go to Pluralsight. Google there. And I'll give you a little timeout because I'm looking over here and it's just all... I'll give you 10 minutes. This is all just this guy. Timeout. That was odd, wasn't it? I don't really have those in those videos. Is there serious stuff in here? Stefan, never been accessed. Oh, you got back to MSI here. Yeah, when MSI... Keep in mind as well, I sent MSI the data that had been sent to me. So to have MSI then come back and go, it's never been accessed. So, well, I sent you the data. That was a bit weird. And also the YouTube video they sent me had screen grabs that were obfuscated that showed the data being accessed, which was a little bit weird. Joe says, that's 2 weeks running where you've picked up my name as an example for getting it. Oh, yeah, because I said Joe. Yeah, sorry, mate. Different Joe. It's a different Joe I was thinking about. Anyway, wait. So 220 million combinations of email address and domain. So there were a total of 71 million unique email addresses in the entire corpus. 69 million of those, my little console app could map against domains. We also found over 100 million passwords we've not previously seen, which is interesting. So we extracted all of the passwords out, put them all in the pwned password service, which is being hit more than 10 billion times a month now. So we get loads and loads of exposure. We were looking around for some funny examples. So Steph and I were looking at the password data and just chatting online. And some of the passwords that were in there that we've never seen before included trying to get kangaroo, capital T, kangaroo lover 69, capital K, and fuck kangaroos, all lowercase. Never been seen in Have I Been Pwned passwords before. And then obviously Stefan started looking around for pwned stuff. So one of the passwords was password to avoid pwned 13. Another one was very good password, all just lowercase, one word. And I like this one. A very good password that no one can guess 2.0. Now I wonder what happened to 1.0. It feels like 1.0 got burned and someone had to go and get 2.0. So anyway, that's all gone into pwned passwords, which is great. So now all of that is searchable. I did put a little screen cap in here of a few different organizations using this as well. And this is just based on referrer headers. So the only clue that we have to who's using pwned passwords, it's probably two clues. If you're requesting it with a user agent string that you customize that identifies yourself, okay, great. Also, if you're embedding it client-side somewhere and calling our API directly, then there is a referrer header. So we can see, for example, the BBC. When you register for the BBC and you look at your dev tools, there's all these api.pwnedpasswords.com requests. Opera, as in the browser. If you create an Opera account, you get to Opera, you know what I mean. And Emirates. I was pretty happy to see Emirates. Big Emirates user myself. So Emirates, when you sign up, is testing your password, which is really cool. Right, so anyway, we've got all of these domains in there now against the Stealer logs. And the next question is, who should see it? Because at the moment, if you plug someone's email address in the front page and you do a search, it comes back and it tells you that they're in the MSI data breach, or the Le Coq Sportif was the other one this week. If you're in there, which is okay. It won't tell you if you're in Ashley Madison, because Ashley Madison has a higher likelihood of causing harm to someone in that breach if someone else sees that they're in there, for obvious reasons. And effectively what we did is we decided that we was me at the time, it's just me, we decided that some breaches are going to be flagged as sensitive and they won't be publicly searchable. And effectively, it's anything that aligns pretty well with the legal definition of sensitive data. I was just having an interesting discussion with a journalist about that, actually. I'll come back to that. But the legal definition is generally around things like religious beliefs, political affiliations, sexuality, anything that leads you down that path of legally sensitive. I didn't want to just be publicly searchable. And now we've got loads of breaches in there that are not publicly searchable, and they're not searchable via the public API either. So you have to prove you control the email address, then you get the result. And we decided to do the same thing with steal-a-log domains, because we now have a situation where an individual might appear against dozens and dozens of different domains. Those domains could be sensitive in nature. We can't verify that. It's not like a discrete data breach where, every now and then I get a data breach with a strange name and I go there in the browser and it's like, oh shit, like that's not good. Like I can't make that publicly searchable, but that's verifying the domain. We can't have 220 million instances of email address against domain and then make sure all those domains are okay to be shown publicly. So there was that. And then of course the additional volume where now one person with one search and one breach is disclosed as potentially using all sorts of different services. And I say potentially because there's also no guarantee as to the accuracy of this data. And there's a bunch of data I looked at, particularly for the domain of a large Fortune 500 company that I just used as a sample, where there are a bunch of individuals in there that appeared against services where you sort of go, you probably shouldn't be doing that with your corporate email. But also in some of those cases, I was trying to verify whether or not that email address existed on the service via password reset or see if you can register again with the same email address. And I couldn't verify it. So is the data legit or not? And as I said several times in the blog post, you can't trust criminals. You cannot trust, shocking. You cannot trust criminals to properly format and parse and validate the data. So anyway, point is we don't want to make that publicly searchable. So that was a decision we made on that. So how do you handle it? Well, you handle it the same way as we handle a sensitive breach. You've got to verify email. Now the model that we use, and this is going to change, it's going to be much better soon. The model we used is when you go to the Notify Me link and have I been pwned, put your email address in, it sends an email to you to the other side of the screen over here. You click on the token that's in there and then you load the website having proven that you have access to the email address. And then it shows you the sensitive ones and it shows you the domains for the steal logs. That has functionally worked. It is confusing. I don't like it. As part of our rebrand, I want to get us to the point where we have, it's almost like a subscriber page, where whether you're an individual that's just verified your email address or whether you have an API key or domain searches, you just have a subscriber page. And we might even just keep you authenticated by a magic link as we do at the moment for a longer period of time, or we'll give you a little checkbox we can choose. And you will have your own personalized page with your data breaches, and we'll be able to do a whole bunch of other stuff then as well. Domain users, what we've done with domain users is we've just put it behind the API. So if you're subscribing to a domain and then you've got people in that domain that have been in a steal-a-log data breach, you can go and take their email address, pass it to an API, it validates that you do control the domain, you've added it to your dashboard. Because it's domain searches, you've got to have a valid subscription because we stopped giving that away for free for the largest domains 18 months ago now. And then if all that's fine, it comes back with JSON responses like, here's the domains that the addresses appeared against. I think we should probably roll that into the UI. We'll do that as part of this rebuild as well. I also think that we should, and Stefan will talk to you about this later as well, I think we should add an attribute to the breach entity, which is steal-a-log, and we'll start flagging steal-a-logs as steal-a-logs. I think I should also go back through the other steal-a-logs I've loaded and added the domains that appear against email addresses for those. So there's a whole bunch of stuff to do around that. We also got a lot of inquiries from a combination of organizations that wanted larger volumes of access to the data. So are there more efficient ways that we can pull this data out for an organization? Various other organizations in this industry that want to feed data in. Usually they then want referrals to people to go and use their service. So they've got to figure out whether that makes sense or not. We had governments that are using the free government service. Got 3 dozen governments using it. A handful of different governments reached out and said, hey, can we get that as part of effectively the free enterprise service we give them? And we don't have an endpoint for that yet. So there, there's just like loads of interest, and it's really, it took a lot of work parsing all that data earlier on, and then there's been a lot of work once we've actually loaded that in. There are also many other Stealer logs with huge volumes of data. There's one corpus in particular I've been sent that is 10 terabytes. 10 terabytes of data. And a lot of that is embedded in multiple different archives, and a lot of it's in different formats. And I feel that it's almost reached the bar of practically impossible to parse. And even just finding disks with enough capacity and then realizing that they're like 7,200 RPM disks that are in my NAS downstairs, which is really just meant for long-term retention. And then I've only got Cat5 going up to my PC, so I can only get like 1 gigabit speeds. I woke up this morning thinking, it's probably been about 4 years since I bought this PC. Yeah, maybe it's time. Maybe just order something really fast. How big can you get an SSD these days? Let me get a few of those. I don't know. This is going to burn so much time. And there are new data breaches to deal with. Now, I just mentioned, I said I was just chatting with a journalist about the definition of sensitive breaches. There is a breach that will go into, or I'll rephrase it, definition of sensitive data. It's a breach that we're going to have been pwned today of Otelia. Now, Otelia is, how do I select this message? Otelia provides services to hotels. In fact, this data was originally sent to me and it was represented as a Marriott data breach. And as I started looking through it, it just became clearer and clearer that it wasn't Marriott. I've been chatting to Lawrence Abrams. He's just put out a story on this today. Otelia data breach exposes info hotel reservations of millions. I think there's about 1.3 million unique people in there I found. Someone's found this exposed data. It's actually Otelia's. The interesting thing here, and the bit I was chatting to Lawrence about, is while Marriott told Bleeping Computer that there is no indications that sensitive information was stolen in the breach, samples of the stolen data shared with Bleeping Computer and Have I Been Pwned's Troy Hunt contain hotel guest personal information. And I said to Lawrence, I think that the way you need to read that discussion is very much like the MSI response about a notifiable data breach. There is a legal, remember I said there's the two things, legal and ethical, social, responsible. There is a legal definition of sensitive data, health data, sexuality, religion, politics. And this doesn't have any of that. There is a separate discussion around, well, it's kind of serious when it's your name and your phone number and your email address and your physical address. Let's not downplay that. So that's, yeah, just a data point there. Let's look at the comments here. James is saying, never really thought about that. You don't want a blackmailer using Have I Been Pwned. Not sure exactly what that was in response to, but maybe you're thinking about the stuff being sensitive. And I mean, to that effect, there's always the discussion of should there be like effectively a non-authenticated public search? Should you be able to put someone's email address on the front page? And I have written a blog post, must have been about 2017, called The Ethics of Running a Data Breach Service, or Data Breach Notification Service. It's not a service to do data breaches, data breach search service. And there are all these really, really good reasons why it works as it is. There are good practical reasons. So, for example, a lot of support departments help people with account takeover. You know, hey, I've just had my Lecoq Sportif account taken over. What's going on? And someone from there is like, put your email address and Have I Been Pwned? And then they're like, oh, well, you've been in all these other data breaches. Do you use the same password? Lots of education things around that. Lots of it used for training. The necessity to wait for an email to come back makes things very hard. Extraordinarily expensive to send large volumes of email. Also entirely kills the API ecosystems for all these other services that are built on this. They die if the email address being searched for has to be validated first. Anyway, it goes on and on and on. It is a very conscious, very clearly well thought out decision. Simon says, whenever I add someone's email address to my list of contacts, I always check it in. Have I been pwned? Why do you do that? I'm curious now. Joe, it sounds like you still have lots to do on Stealer logs. It's also great that you've released the first tranche of functionality. It's great stuff. Thank you. Yeah, mate, and we will keep it up. James says largest SSD is 123 terabytes. Ooh. Now, I've actually got a 20 terabyte spinning Rust 7200 RPM, I think there's 7200 RPM Western Digital Red drive that I had tried to put in my Synology NAS, and I only realized afterwards it was not compatible. Weirdly enough, I bought two of them. One of them went in, and Synology went, not compatible, do you want to do it anyway? And I'm like, yeah, YOLO. And it was fine. The second one just didn't take at all. So I pulled out my Lenovo, what is it, P720 Tower that I must have got, I feel like I got it around the 2020 era. So it's got 5 years on it. I was like, I wonder if I can actually fit this. It was all kind of jammed in and everything's working, and decided to do things differently. But I'm now just, like, I could get a bigger drive. I could put it in the tower, but I'm also going, it's 5 years old. Maybe it's time to repurpose it. We'll see. I'm going to end up on the Lenovo website spending a lot of money. So here's Simon about why he's checking his friends on Have I Been Pwned to find out which breaches they've been in. Can add some insight into their character. And just curiosity, you're just nosy. That's what it is. And look, honestly, like, this is where it sort of sits in that kind of middle ground of, you're not doing bad things with it, but it's also disclosing something about other people. And hopefully you would then use that to say, hey, look, did you know that you've been in these breaches, and you really should subscribe to Have I Been Pwned, and also don't reuse your password. That might be helpful. But that is also a good example where Simon will not find that someone has been in the Ashley Madison data breach or in some politically motivated one. You also won't find if they've been in, say, a white supremacy website. And the simple reason for that is that just the presence of an email address in a service doesn't mean the person used that service or is endorsed in their beliefs or anything like that. It just means the email address is in there. Someone who doesn't like them could have registered them on the website, and the website simply retains the data, which is what the vast majority of them do. Okay, so that's where we're at with Stealer logs. We have a massive amount of work ahead of us in terms of everything from actually representing those Stealer logs as a category of data within those breach entities, going back and loading the domains from previous Stealer logs, going through and adding new Stealer logs. All that ties in with the rebrand stuff and trying to create a nice subscription experience that makes it easier for people to see data about themselves. So we've got a lot on it. All right, I'm going to wrap that up there. I'm not going to go and do any of that now. I'm going to go down to the beach because it looks beautiful outside. And I'll come back and we'll do this again next week, and there'll be a heap of new data breaches by then. Thanks, folks.